Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Brother Mushtaq representing Happy Strong Family. And today we are focusing on the topic of planning marriage, the essentials. And in terms of guests for today, to my left, we have Imam Arif from Darul Khair Center in Stouffville.
Jazakallah for having me.
You're welcome, Imam Arif. Welcome back, by the way. This, I think, would be episode 2 for you, right?
Two, yeah. I think third one.
Oh,
Yeah,
number
yeah,
three.
number three.
Okay, let's keep the count going. And then to my right, we have Dr. Zehan Rashid, founding member of the Happy Strong Family team.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much
Assalam.
for arranging this. It's always an exciting thing to see that the community is gathering together for something that is
Alhamdulillah.
a source of huge khair and benefit to everybody.
For sure. Now, just in terms of a quick rundown as to what this episode will be all about, we're going to focus on Islam versus culture, youngsters, how, for the most part, they're ignoring marriage, and then the importance of marriage. So now let's get to question number 1, and that would be, how can we bring up marriage as a concept for youngsters early on?
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa ma ba'd. So the first question is that for children, I have a few points because this discussion, Dr. Saab and Mushtaq Bhai, has been brought up many times by various different scholars. And so I've highlighted 2-3 points right from the beginning of how this normally plays out. And I would again mention that all cases are not the same.
Okay.
There's no one solution for all. I think as for some children, there may be some, one way to resolve an issue, and for some, there may be a different way to resolve the issue. So first and foremost, when it comes to children, I mentioned the other day on Friday in one of my Jummah khutbah as well, that they are a test for us. We have children. Allah has given us children when they're younger, when they're babies, and they, the problems are different. They're crying, they're colicky, whatever it may be. Then they grow up. The challenges are different. Especially when they hit the teens, then we find that there's many other problems that they're going through and challenges, especially as parents that we have and we face with our children. So the tarbiyat, as we have always spoken about, and I don't want to get into the tarbiyat point of view, is the tarbiyat starts at an early age. So we instill in them the good morals and values, and build on their aqidah and their akhlaq and their their ibadat, etc. Now, when they're going to high school and middle school and even to universities and colleges, so at that point of view, first and foremost, what we need to do is prevent them from doing haram. And what normally happens is we also, once they come to us, then we're faced with a challenge here that, now they want to marry this person. Now they want to marry that person. And that can be resolved as well. But first and foremost, the thing that children are getting up to, especially with the social media and everything else, is they go out, they'll date. And when they dating, I don't want to go into the detail, but we know that what happens in society and in the friendship circle, when they go out, Allah forbid, they go the whole way.
Right.
Allah forbid, they may commit zina. They're getting into, and it's so sad to hear sometimes. And coming from some religious families, the parents would say they give in. Right from the beginning, they would teach their children, it's okay, go and find somebody yourself, as long as she's a Muslimah. So sometimes even the parents are giving them the go-ahead to go out and date.
Right.
And this is what we want to prevent, to them committing that haram in the first place. Dating is not something which, we know from the ahadith and from Quran that whenever there's two people alone young, the third is shaitan. So we need to, again, teach them adab, etiquettes of lowering the gaze, about, abstaining from, mixing with the opposite gender, and so on and so forth. Because once they get into the dating and now they've made up their mind for somebody, then they come to you. Now there's a whole set of new challenges.
Mhm.
So our children, we need to be on top of it somehow to make sure that the tarbiyat is done in such a way that, and the question is coming up, that from an early age, as Dr. Sab was mentioning earlier, that when they come to us or we prepare them, just like we teach them other things at the early age, at the age of 12, even before that, we teach them about salah and tahara and everything else. And because at an earlier and earlier age now in society, they're getting to learn about these things. They become, it's a, Allah forbid, I don't even want to use those words, but it's a hyper, so, uh, society now where everything is streaming
Mhm.
online on the phones in school, the way the hot weather now. Just I went the other day, and the things, back in our days, the clothing was much more decent than how it is today. And you go to schools and high schools and you see how they're dressed. So if our girls are going in that kind of environment every day, then there has to be some sort of protection for them, and we need to be of support to them. We need to educate them
Sure.
and teach them, like, look, you're going to be in this environment, but you have to be careful. You have to be careful. You have to choose wise who your friends are. Don't speak with these types of people. Don't hang around in this sort of company. Otherwise, it's very, very easily that quietly behind your backs that they will be doing haram things. Now, having said that, uh, so number one is, I think we need to educate them at an early age, and I think that's one of the questions. I think, just like careers are, uh, at an early age, these issues should be brought up with our children,
Right.
and we tell them, look, the halal way to do it is, inshallah, when you're of age and you want to get married, and if you see somebody that you like, then you come to us, and if you're ready, then we can speak about it. I will support you, and then we can get you married. But again, I mean, I don't want to intertwine with all the other different questions, but we'll get to that. Like, how do we, get them to, at what age? Because Islam versus culture, at exactly what age should you get them married?
Right.
Right? The Islam is quiet about that. So, at what age is the right age,
Mhm.
and what age is too late, and what age is too early?
Okay. Okay.
So I think we'll get to that later. But I think first step first is we need to, what our children are getting engaged in right now, dating, haram, zina, and we need to stop that and prevent that.
Mhm.
That's step number one. And step number two, I would say that now, if they are involved with somebody,
Yeah.
then they come to you. Now we have to analyze the situation, right? They've gone out, and it's not fair on the parents. I mean, from the children who engage themselves, they go do dating, they've done everything with them, and then they come to the parents without any regard to the parents, and they put them in a very tight, tough position, saying that, like, now I want to marry this girl no matter what.
Mhm.
And that the parents have looked after you right from the front, get right from when you were an infant, when you were born, and there should be some say. And the parents, again, they should have known where their children were, what they were getting up to, and should have been some support so that the children would have been able to come to the parents earlier and speak to them about this issue. Okay, so I think, would you want to add something, Dr. Sab, before we go on to the second point about the parents? I mean, when that scenario is there, when the children now do come, that how do we tackle this issue? I mean, you've had a lot of experience, Dr. Saab, and I'm sure these
Jazakallah
cases have come
khair,
forward. That
Jazakallah khair, Imam Arif and Brother Mushtaq. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. I have two things that I have emphasized from the beginning on this topic. One is the communication aspect of things. The way you and me have connected with our children for 15 and 17 years. How do the children see the father? What is the bonding that has developed between them? How have they identified each other's personalities? Is the father really a murabbi? Is he somebody that the son looks up to? He won't say it, but you and me know when they're growing up, me and you are heroes. We are the ones who make ourselves heroes. by acting, unfortunately, as you said, in a manner that is either insulting, condescending, and sometimes just completely ignoring. When careers become more important than my relationship with Allah, then I already have a huge issue. So I don't see these things as the problem. These are symptoms of the problem. The ability to identify a worldview. I have been placed on this earth to be the Khalifa of Allah. I have a responsibility that holds me to a high moral standard. I'm not some regular person. I don't say this with any contempt towards the people that don't know Allah. But I say, so what is the benefit, my son and my daughter, of having this beautiful legacy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What's the benefit of knowing that a young man came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in the masjid and asked to be with his girlfriend? We all know the hadith. How did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam treat him?
Treat him exactly.
Was he kicked out of the masjid? Was he humiliated? Was he made to feel small? Or was he actually invited to come and understand what he was doing?
Right.
I think if that communication aspect, and there's got to be a lot of mahabba, there's got to be a lot of love.
And that hadith, if you don't mind me interjecting, shows that the Sahabi, before he went to that point, he actually came and consulted with the Prophet.
Absolutely.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Alayhi salatu
And
wasalam.
so we, again, need to have that communication, as you said, with our children, that if they are getting up to these things, they can freely come to us. And, there's that barrier of respect, etc. as well. And obviously the Sahabi had it for the Prophet ﷺ as well. But, they come to you as a father, as a mother, and they're saying, look, I have these feelings, or I might get up to these things. What should I do? Or, if there's an imam, somebody, and alhamdulillah, as an imam, I have many children who reach out to me. Just so many right now in 2-3 days, so many people, and even people who are married reach out to me. And that's a good thing. I feel like, alhamdulillah, I should be even improving myself even more, that I'm more approachable. And even as parents, that parents should be more approachable from their children. And because if you just keep on ignoring them and they're ignoring you, and you're very harsh with them, as you said, and you just ignore them and think that everything's fine, and just has how the ostrich just buries their head in the ground and think that there's nothing going around, ignoring the whole the environment and the scenarios in the family. So I think what we need to do is, you're right, we need to build that communication, inshallah. And then so I think if you want to elaborate a little bit more, so I think that's number one.
I think that is important, where our children are able to communicate with us without threat of being humiliated, or being made to feel small, or being made to feel like they are crazy for having such thoughts. And I often remind myself, I had those feelings when I was younger.
Yes,
Right.
that's it.
I went through all of these challenges in different mode. But Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, don't treat your children the way you grew up, because they're in a different mahal, different environment. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have access to telecommunication and communication like we have. Sometimes, Imam Arif and Brother Mushtaq, I've seen youngsters that communicate with people across the other side of the world more than they communicate with the person who's sitting next to them. I mean, that's a disaster in terms of human communications, that he or she does not care for what his father and I. Unlike some fathers, I don't emphasize the fact that I've been good to them. I emphasize the fact that they are in a relationship with Allah, that they're not answerable to me, that they're answerable to the one that put them on this earth. That worldview, as I say, confidence of what I'm doing is right because Allah said so. And I don't just believe it, I put it into action. I'm not saying I'm going to become an angel tomorrow, but I recognize I have high potential and I'm not using it. I'm picking up the wrong people as role models. Unfortunately, many times in my experience, the father and sometimes the mother have literally dropped themselves from where the children put them by doing actions that are completely unbecoming of a Muslim and a Muslimah. So these things have an effect on our children. I think before we emphasize religiosity, I emphasize humanity, emotionality, connection on the person on the basis of love. I love you, my son. I love you unconditionally. I know you're going through challenges. I went through challenges. I know you are having a hard time. We all do at this age. But we have a wonderful roadmap. We should share these things.
And I want to add one thing. It's sometimes uh, we show love to them, obviously. But then as fathers and mothers, there has to be another side of it too. And although muhabbat and love works all the time, but there has to be certain restrictions and certain, you have to be a little bit strict at times as well.
Some boundaries.
Some boundaries. There has to be a balance. So if they, for example, are, if you find them, for example, and I think as parents, if they have social media, if they have their phones or their laptops or whatever, then maybe at times we can say, look, you are living in this house and there's some rules and regulations for everyone. And from time to time, we will have to check to see that you're okay. Or we filter in some, some security,
controls, etc.
privacy control and all that too.
So then what about expectations? I think expectations are huge, both from a parental perspective or parental mindset, and then to cross that over to get to the other side, the expectations from a young adult or from a teen point of view, right? Like you said, teens are definitely going to get into dating. Young adults are going to definitely get into dating or relationships. So then what is that expectation that they have? So let's break this down. Let's talk it from a parent perspective first. As a parent, what expectation should I have for my children, for my kids to get married? And I think if this is going to cross over into question number 3 about culture.
Culture, yes.
Because I think culture plays a huge part in this. You want, obviously, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, a little bit exaggerating, but you want your child to marry the best of the best, a doctor, lawyer, a cryptocurrency broker nowadays. They want them to get married to a person who has their own house, a Porsche in the driveway, an MBA doctorate. But is that realistic? Is that realistic?
So as I was saying, okay, now they've come to you and we've, when it comes to the dating, I just mentioned that, there should be a balance. Now say the scenario is in Islam, it encourages us to get married early. Quran says those who are not married in your communities, get them married. And if they're poor, Allah will make them rich. Allah mentions that in the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ mentions to Ali radiallahu anhu in one hadith in Tirmidhi that, Ya Ali, don't delay 3 things. Your salah when it's time, the janazah when it's there prepared. And number 3, when your daughter is of age, don't delay the marriage. And so we find in many other, traditions, hadith and the Quranic ayahs, that getting them married early. Now, as you said, that what are the expectations, culture? As I mentioned right at the beginning, there's no age, mentioned that this should be the age. Now, that's where culture plays in. Culture sometimes, if it's contrary to the Sharia, then we leave culture out. If Islam says something and culture says something else, then we leave culture out. But there's certain cultures which does not clash with Islam. It's just how the society is. Okay, and society sometimes makes marriage very, very difficult. And that's the way of shaitan, where he makes halal very difficult and haram easy. Now we look at the house prices and the economy right now. House prices, like they're out of the roof, like over $1 million just for a townhouse.
I thought you were going to say gas prices.
Gas prices
they also
as well.
seem to be out of control.
Yeah, gas prices, house prices, everything.
Grocery prices.
And now the children are they're in education till they're 25, 30. I just had a call the other day where the boy is saying that I've done my master's and now the parents want, my wife to do her master's as well. Like, and at what age will they complete the masters and the PhDs and then pay off their debts and then get married? And that may lead them up to the late 20s or even early 30s.
Yeah.
As parents, I mentioned this so many times in my lectures and my khutbas, that do we really think, because there's a hadith, it may be a little bit weak, but the Prophet ﷺ says after, when they're at the age of marriage, and then you don't resolve that issue of getting them married, and they fall into haram, you will also get the sin for it. Although general term is somebody's sin does not fall on another, but you were the means of it.
Right.
You did not facilitate their marriage when it was time for them to get married. You set the bar so high for them that, you know what, they're going to engage and fall into haram.
Yeah. And I think once that bar is set high, then it becomes, you become used to it. I know of a few real life examples of a few people that have become very successful in life. Either they are that lawyer now, they are that doctor, and they're in their 30s, they're in their mid 30s, late 30s, and they're like, I haven't been married so far, I don't need it. So obviously there's something going on,
Right.
but they see no need to get married.
I mean,
They're Muslims.
the issue of responsibility of another human being has become very big for our youngsters and for us. We don't take responsibility because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, An-nikahu nisfuddin.
Yes.
So nikah is being placed at a very high pedestal where our relationship with Allah is depending on our relationship with another human being. Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam are the first relationship that we are being told.
Yes,
And these two human beings are our role models for how Allah started the community of human beings. So it means that relationship is really important. And Imam Arif and Brother Mushtaq, my emphasis still is, these conversations just aren't done enough.
No,
The homes are not ringing with these conversations. They're being brought in at 4 and 5. So career is at the top. House prices may be there. Perhaps which particular country should the woman or the boy come from. These are, so our children are listening to almost all the wrong narratives for 15, 20, 30 years. Then to expect them now to have good expectations, and they're seeing all that's being on parade outside, and you and me know what that means in the summer. And to ask them to marry a woman who is maintaining her modesty, who stayed away from all the things that harm a person's humanity. I don't even talk about religiosity. I said, what do you think it feels like to have 4 boyfriends before you actually find the man that you're looking for?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
You don't need to have an Islamic perspective. You just need to look at the reality of what's going on. Single mothers, delinquent children, drugs. These are not things that we need to particularly highlight for anybody. It's obvious. These are rooted down in the issue of a disturbed family, a dysfunctional family, a late onset relationship. I believe are all the things that are contributing to this huge thing. So I think we need to bring in this whole picture.
And the thing is, once they hit the 30s, then it's very difficult to find a partner for marriage. Now the child will come, okay, now I'm ready to get married at 35.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're looking at a bride or somebody to get married to. You're going through different channels now, and that's also becoming a challenge from how we were back in our days, where we had arranged marriages and families used to talk to amongst one another. It still happens and occurs, but very little now. More is the websites, the shadi website.com, etc. So now at that age, and again, even at that age, the expectations are so high.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, that she should have this or he should be like this and they should be like that. I mean, there's no harm. Compatibility should be there. Attraction should be there. There's a hadith that Prophet ﷺ mentions, and the scholars elaborate on that. That when you see the qualities of a good wife is when you see her, you should become happy. Saratka, like it makes you happy, and the scholars say it makes you happy to see, mashallah, she's so faithful, she's so nice, and vice versa, obviously. But at the same time, the attraction should be there. The Prophet ﷺ also encouraged to look at the wife before getting married. So we have these instructions in place as well. So these issues do matter, but again, the main thing is fadfar bidhat deen. Like deen is the primary and the main focus, that we should look at somebody who's religious. And just the other day, one parent called me, and I'm going to keep this anonymous, but the child is 22 or 23, and now, and we have this inter religious marriages, right? Whether with a Christian at a kitab, or maybe somebody from a different sect,
Mhm.
and now they've come, and he's just adamant that he wants to marry this girl. So why is it come to that point now? Now there's a huge challenge that you've left him to be, and they've gone to that extent. They've dated. Now the youngsters don't understand. Love is blind, as they say. They made up with their mind. Now they want to marry this girl.
Mhm.
And then the parents now reach out to the imams and say, explain to him, please, that this is wrong.
Right.
Right. So again, comes back, boils down to your tarbiyat of the children, your communication with the children. If you do want to get married, let us know. We will help you find someone
sure.
suitable for you.
For sure.
Whatever we can do. And don't leave it too late.
Yeah.
Late, that's in your eyes. I mean, you should know when your child is ready, but don't delay it so much that it becomes difficult. Somebody was telling me just recently that, Maulana, now it takes at least 2 years, a minimum of 2 years to find the right partner.
Oh, wow.
Because you're going to go to various different families.
Mhm.
This family, that family, this family. Okay, there's something wrong with this. And the boy rejects the girl rejects the boy. And sometimes, you know what? The children are just playing games. They have already somebody in mind, but they just want to make their parents happy.
So with that, let's continue to deconstruct point number 2, and that is the expectations from a youth, from a young
youth.
adult
Mhm.
point of view.
Mhm.
Going back to a very early podcast, some of the youth themselves, they talked up the halal quotient, and that's something I've never heard of. I never grew up with that. And it's this concept of, well, if this person they read their salah, they maybe already have a beard, or they're wearing their hijab, but they listen to music in the car. Well, that's a halal quotient. That's of whatever, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. That's good enough for me,
Mhm.
right? Because they're maybe doing this and this, but they're not doing this, which may or may not be in the deen, but it's still good enough. So again, coming back full circle to expectations.
Okay.
For a youth, when now let's position it within deen. Within deen, whether it's through hadith, Quran, Sunnah, how can a young adult, how can a young person say, you know what, if I'm focusing on deen, if I'm focusing on someone who will be my partner, someone who will be pleasing to me, should I just take that leap of faith and go with it? Like how can a young person have that framework of an expectation?
See, Mushtaq bhai, I think as human beings, we have to make our children realize that nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
I'm an imam. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect except for the Prophet ﷺ. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has flaws. You're not going to find somebody who's beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Somebody
In the movies you will.
Yeah, in the movies you will, right? Who's going to be religious? Who's going to be faithful to good to your children and everything, a good cook and everything else. You're just making that's fantasy. That's coming up in the question, as I mentioned.
And you're the one that brought up the blonde.
I might get into trouble for that, but so no, but the reality is that's in the mindset of the children. They want to. That's what one parent actually said. That look, in my son, he's not so handsome, but he's looking for this type of girl.
Okay, so
And
parent.
yeah, so I mean, there's no harm in it if you get it, alhamdulillah. But nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
So even when it comes to deen, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. I know of people when they got married, the wife did not do her hijab, the husband wasn't practicing, but it comes. Alhamdulillah, they're from mashallah, compatible. They have some deen in them.
Yeah.
They do realize that this is halal and haram. They can distinguish. They are God fearing, but sometimes they're not perfect they're not perfect in all aspects, in all fields. So that comes slowly, and that comes with understanding and love. Yes, if you find somebody is having a very, very bad habit, they are, Allah forbid, drug users, or have a habit of drinking, or not always hang around in good company, or whatever. Those are issues that we basically whenever we get married, we do mashwara and we consult and we do istikhara.
Mhm.
And when we consult with people from the other side of the family and their friends and family, and if we get positive feedback, then alhamdulillah, we know that we're going into a good family
Okay.
with good, upbringing, good morals, etc. But again, if you pinpoint just one small thing and say, "Oh, I'm not going to get married because of this," then it's going to be very difficult for you to find the right partner,
Right.
right? So for the youth, come out of that fantasy land and fantasy images that you have of what you see on the movies, etc., and think about when this child spoke to me about this marriage with a person from a different sect. I explained to him, I said, look, in the future, you have to don't think about just yourself and what you want, but you're going to have children in the future. And I've seen, Dr. Saab, those who have married in these different faiths, that they come with Quran class and wearing crosses. And they say we go to church and we go to the masjid. And we enjoy Christmas and we enjoy Eid.
Hmm.
And how confusing that is for the children.
Right.
So all those things may be permissible. Some people may be still in the little bit fold of it, but their practices are different. But you're going to have huge challenges afterwards when it comes to your children. And as parents and as adults, when our children are there, we need to explain that to them.
Yeah, I think that's where marriage workshops, places where you have a conversation with people, because in all reality, this conversation cannot resolve everything that is to do with Imam Arif and myself were talking before we came on air. It's impossible to address all of these things in 30
No,
minutes.
you can't. It's impossible.
But we are hoping that those who are listening having a good idea that these problems are not isolated to one part of the ummah. These are universal problems.
Universal problems.
And if there are universal problems, then we must have universal approaches to these, which with some variation, as Imam Arif said, apply. But don't do things which are going to be counterproductive from the beginning, where you have two people with very different views. Ahle Kitab, a woman of the book, may bring alcohol into your house. She may also bring in people that do not really respect your values. So I think if you're getting into that kind of challenge, I highly discourage people to do that, because that 3-month honeymoon will lead to 3 years of very painful and unfortunately very stressful environment. So I think it is realistic to say, I can't compromise on something so basic that will, my emotional attachment with her is affecting my relationship with the one that's put me on this earth. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, you cannot be disobedient to the Creator to please the creation, which is what this situation will end up in. I'm not saying all the time.
So I think from the parents' point of view, don't delay. If they come, have a good communication. And don't delay too much. And inshallah, help your children in finding the right partner. And the children should have keep the parents, consult with their parents. Your parents are, they love you and they want the best for you. So if, so we have to keep that in mind for the youngsters as well. Otherwise, recently, I like giving specific, although keeping it anonymous, because people can relate to it. There's a lot of love marriages. People go on dates and, they see the rosy side of everything. Then they get married. There's a huge wedding. The parents agree. Okay, fine. They've found their partner. The marriage does not last even 3 months, as you just said. Literally, there's cases that just come about where a few months down and marriages are split apart.
And the basis of almost every rom-com movie out there is that the youth want the blessings of their parents, right? So let's end it on a positive note. We're just going to now wrap up this session. It's been an informative session, and the whole focus has been on planning marriage, and we've gone through 3 different topics. One, definitely open communication, both from a parental perspective for youths used to communicate with their parents. Then expectations, right? The expectations of parents, expectations of youth themselves. And then number 3, we did a little bit of crossover in terms of culture and what really, just to make marriage simple, right?
Simple, exactly. Yes.
So then in 10 seconds or less, Dr. Zehan, and then over to you, Imam Arif. So just, you can look straight into the camera, give your 10-second kind of wrap up for this particular topic, please.
I would say to people who are listening, prioritize this as something that is going to end you in Allah's pleasure in Jannah. Think of it as one of the most valuable things that you will ever do in your life, to create a relationship and a family that will become the legacy of Sayyidina Ibrahim, as he said in his dua, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Jazakallah khair.
Imam Arif.
Again, alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give everyone the tawfiq and
Ameen.
grant hidayah to everyone.
Ameen.
And,
Ameen.
we are faced with these challenges. Our children are a fitna, they are a test for us. And as Dr. Sab said, we have to just continue as parents trying and making dua for them in the end. We as human beings, we can only try. And then, from amongst the duas that are never rejected, one dua is the duas of the parents for their children. Try your hardest, do the tarbiyat, do the upbringing, try to get them married. And the Prophet ﷺ, one hadith that comes to mind, that the person who upbrings, 2 daughters or 3 daughters, and gets them to the age and gets them married, they'll be like this with me in Jannah. Wallahi, like this. And somebody said, how about 2 daughters? Yeah, because even 2 daughters. And the Sahaba said, if even somebody said 1 daughter, then he would have said, yes, even 1 daughter. So these will be, as you said, our Jannah, our means of Jannah. But ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum, we have to save ourselves and our children, try our hardest, and inshallah make dua to Allah. May Allah give everyone tawfiq, inshallah.
Ameen, ameen. And on that note, we'll end this session of the Happy Strong Family live stream. So again, to my right, Dr. Zehan, the founding director of Happy Strong Family, and we have Imam Arif, the Imam of Darul Khair in Stouffville. So this is Brother Mushtaq signing off. Tune in and tune in often. Go to our YouTube channel. Just look up Happy Strong Family or go to the website. All right, then. Bye for now.
SubhanAllah.